Hello and welcome to the first ever Vectored Armada tournament by NMSS. Uh, just wanted to thank you all for being here on this inaugural event, but before we get into the actual battles, I do want to take a minute to go over each of the fleets that were submitted. So first up, the first fleet received was from Xderp 7. He called it 20K Tourney Edition. He's got these two large blockers called Lower Takalia. They're shielded, they've got a light armament, but they're relatively fast. The medium Pockerel are also pretty quick and carry a bit more of a heavy armament, but you can see the fleet is kind of more or less designed so that the front layer of ships, the two blockers will arrive first, but the two Pockerel will arrive about the same time. The center ship here is relatively slow, but carries several very heavy cannons and a good bit of forward shielding. So this one, you can tell, is intended to be heavy-duty fire support for the rest of the fleet, which I'm looking forward to seeing how they perform. It's a nice composition, tank and spank. Up next, we have a fleet from Luke AP. He's using several of these tiny distractors out in the outside. They're fairly slow and they've got tiny railguns, but they're going to try and close with the targets. Meanwhile, he has two different larger ships. The drone flighter, which, as the name suggests, it launches drones. It has two Tali bays and two Goshawk bays. It also has a few missile launchers in here too, I believe. Yeah, Swader launchers hiding in there. His other one is the Fluster bomber. This one uses several very heavy missiles and a few lighter missiles in order to saturate the enemy's point defense and hopefully get those heavier missiles through, and 4 more of the light distractors. Next up, we have an entry from Debris Field. He has 5 of these smaller hexagons called Opto-Hexman V1.1. They essentially are just intended to be sponges, and a much larger Cluster Fudge 2, which, as you can see, has a few heavy guns packed away deep inside the armor layers. And much like previous tournament submissions that I've seen from Debris, he's relying on these hexagons to create space, but he also has a good number of the hard shield or soft shields that help absorb incoming fire. Overall, one of the more durable entries, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it performs. Next, we have the Alpha Vortex from Teotihuacan. So this ship has a few lasers on it. It has a lot of drones and a lot of rotational thrust, but you'll notice that the blocks look a little weird. And that's because Teo used file editing to actually rotate the blocks. And because of the way the physics engine interacts with rotated blocks, if they're thin enough afterward, then the game can't register physics collisions with them. So all of these arms are actually invulnerable, and the shields won't fully protect the arms, but you can't hurt them anyway. This ship launches a lot of drones. It has a handful of lasers. Overall, pretty solid combatant, but because of the nature of having to do the file editing, I'm actually going to pull this from the general pool, and there will be a special event afterward where we just get to watch this thing fight a few times. Next up, we have the submission from Joyous 18. It's a single ship submission. You can see it's using a lot of these Heron rail cannons, and it has a couple of hard shields strewn about it, and some soft shields in the back for extra ancillary defense. Looking forward to seeing how this performs. This should be a lot of firepower, and I'm imagining it'll be nice and punchy once it actually gets into the fight. Because of the way that the thrusters here are arranged, it actually should be fairly agile as well, with the forward thrusters helping accelerate and having an abundance of turning thrust. But we'll see how that goes. Next up, we have Fort Garlic from Splinterman. You can see it's using 2 of the very large railguns and several of the chain guns, which should give this thing pretty good firepower at a variety of ranges and an abundance of armor. And as you can see, everything in here is kind of a mess. The game does not prohibit stacking blocks on top of each other in any way, which should make this thing very durable, and it gives a a lot of ability to create interesting shapes while also building a lot of durability into it. And with the ports everywhere, you can kind of just mount whatever you want anywhere. You can also see there's several of the directional shields. Overall, I'm expecting quite a bit out of this, but we'll see very shortly how it does. And lastly, we have my filler submission. It's just 10 of these little things. They're kind of slow. They've got the forward shield, they've got a soft shield, and they've got a chain gun is pretty much their entire armament. Overall, they're not great, but we'll see how they hold up. They're a lot more durable than you might expect because of that frontal shield. But once that frontal shield goes away, they tend to die pretty quickly. And since the frontal shield only protects the front, any attacks from the angles are pretty devastating.